U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs took effect on global economies today, placing the world economy under a cloud of uncertainty. For China, the levy went up to 104%. Acting President Han Duck-soo and the American leader spoke over the phone last night, signaling a potential package deal, combining the issues of trade and the allies' defense cost-sharing. More presidential hopefuls are making their moves. Liberal leader Lee Jae-myung stepped down from his post as the chairman of the Democratic Party, apparently to prepare for the race, while former Labor Minister Kim Moon-soo made his bid public for the People Power Party, among others. It's April 9th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Country-specific U.S. tariffs took effect today, putting much uncertainty on the world economy. The team from Korea is in Washington, with the U.S. saying its allies, South Korea and Japan, in mind for negotiations. Meantime, the levy for China went up to 104%. Kim Bo-kyung has more.
Countries hit by tariffs have already launched negotiations with the U.S. as the steeper rates of reciprocal tariffs for what Trump calls the worst offenders were officially imposed on Wednesday. South Korea, which saw a 25% reciprocal tariff imposed as of 1 p.m. Wednesday local time, began its talks as well. Along with acting President Han Duck-soo's phone call with U.S. President Donald Trump, Seoul's Trade Minister Chung In-kyo arrived at Washington, D.C. on Tuesday for talks with the U.S. Trade Representative. Chung said Korea has two major projects it could bring to the table.
The Alaska LNG project is an important part, and shipbuilding, where discussions are already ongoing between the two countries, is an area the U.S. is particularly interested in, so it will likely be brought to the negotiating table for discussions.
While saying his goal is to completely eliminate mutual tariffs, Chung said Korea will aim to reduce the tariffs gradually if elimination is difficult. Such talks come as the U.S. is prioritizing its key allies, South Korea and Japan, in holding trade negotiations. Among dozens of countries facing high reciprocal tariffs, Kevin Hassett, chairman of the White House National Economic Council, said in an interview with local media on Tuesday that Seoul and Tokyo are the highest priorities, citing them as major trading partners and allies with large trade surpluses with the United States. Meanwhile, China now needs to deal with Washington's huge 104% tariff across all Chinese imports. China was already set to see tariffs increase by 34% on Wednesday, following two rounds of 10% levies. The rate shot up again as Beijing did not back down on its decision to impose 34% retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods by noon on Tuesday.
Countries like China, who have chosen to retaliate and try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers, are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break, and America will not break under his leadership.
Regarding the massive tariff on China, Trump at the National Republican Congressional Committee dinner on Tuesday said though it might seem outrageous, China has imposed tariffs of 100 or 125% on many American items. He then said China would at some point negotiate. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Korea's benchmark KOSPI fell below the 2,300 mark on Wednesday in the wake of the major U.S. tariffs that went into effect. And markets elsewhere also took a hit. Pei-Ji has the details.
South Korea's benchmark KOSPI has dipped below the 2,300 points for the first time in almost a year and a half. The KOSPI index closed at 2,293.7 on Wednesday, down 1.74% from the day before. The sharp decline comes after it already lost more than 5% in a single day on Monday. Over the course of 3 days, the benchmark index has lost 139.7 trillion Korean won in market value, which is more than $94 billion. The country's tech-heavy Kosdaq also slid more than 2% to finish at 643.39. The local currency also fell, with the $1 rate briefly declining to its lowest since the global financial crisis more than 16 years ago. The Korean won dropped to 1,484 per dollar on Wednesday, the lowest since March 2009. And it wasn't just South Korea that saw sharp declines on Wednesday. In neighboring countries, Japan's Nikkei 225 lost almost 4%, while Taiwan's benchmark stock index also shed nearly 5.8%. Meanwhile, U.S. stocks also continued to drop amid tariff fears. The S&P 500 fell sharply on Tuesday to close below 5,000 points for the first time in almost a year. It has now lost $5.83 trillion in value for its steepest 4 days of losses since the index was created in the 1950s. Apple shares have fallen more than 20% since last week's tariff announcement, wiping out $770 billion in market cap over the past 4 days. This was mainly because Apple is considered as one of the companies most exposed to the trade war due to its heavy reliance on China, clearly showing that the current uncertainty around tariffs is overwhelming. 배은지, Arirang News.
A deal between Korea and the U.S. could involve the one that ties trade and security. The country's acting president spoke over the phone with the American leader last night. Oh Soo-young reports.
The leaders of South Korea and the United States have signaled interest in a potential win-win package deal amid tensions over tariffs and defense cost sharing. This came during a phone call Tuesday between acting President Han Duck-soo and US President Donald Trump, marking the first top-level contact between the two countries since Trump began his second term 78 days ago. It also follows a leadership shift in Seoul, just 4 days after President Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office by the Constitutional Court, placing Prime Minister Han in full control as acting president. The 28-minute conversation focused on trade and security issues. On trade, both leaders agreed to continue ministerial-level talks aimed at mutually beneficial outcomes, particularly around trade balance. Han highlighted potential cooperation in 3 key sectors: shipbuilding, liquefied natural gas, and trade adjustment. The call came just 16 hours before the US implemented its so-called Liberation Day levies, a 10% baseline tariff on all imports, and a country-specific reciprocal tariffs on goods from South Korea. On security issues, Han called for stronger unity on North Korea's denuclearization as both leaders reaffirmed their dedication to the South Korea-US alliance. They also pledged close coordination on North Korea policies and backed continued trilateral cooperation with Japan. Beyond the formalities, both sides appeared willing to work towards a deal. Speaking to CNN earlier that day, Han ruled out retaliation against Trump's tariffs, unlike China or Japan, and called for a, quote, cool negotiation. On top of last month's duties on steel and aluminium, Washington's latest measures target key Korean exports, such as automobiles, batteries, and machinery. While calling Trump's string of tariffs a pity, Han said he believed a win-win deal between friends could encourage Washington to ease its stance. Meanwhile, Trump took to Truth Social, posting that he had a great call with Han. He said they discussed South Korea's trade surplus, tariffs, LNG purchases, and cost sharing for US troops in Korea. Trump claimed South Korea began paying billions in military costs during his first term, only for, quote, sleepy Joe Biden to cancel the deal. However, no such agreement was finalized. A new cost-sharing pact was signed under Biden last year, raising South Korea's contribution by 8.3% from 2026, with annual increases tied to inflation, marking a significant financial commitment by Seoul. Still, as a growing number of countries strike back against his tariffs, Trump seemed hopeful for a breakthrough with South Korea, saying he saw potential for a great deal. Noting that South Korea's, quote, top team on trade was en route to Washington, he floated a one-stop shopping approach which bundles trade, defense, and industrial policy into one sweeping pact. A South Korean government official told local press on Wednesday that Seoul prioritizes the easing of tariffs. The official added that Trump seemed open to a streamlined package deal, but said sealing a pact will depend on the pace of negotiations and what cards the two sides bring to the table. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Daejeong.
The government has framed out a support package for South Korea's auto industry as it seeks to ease the impact of U.S. tariffs targeting the auto sector. Shin Se-byuk explains.
South Korea will funnel an additional 2 trillion won or $1.3 billion into the auto and parts industry amid pressure from the 25% tariff imposed by the Trump administration.
We'll provide 2 trillion won in special policy financing for affected firms and offer low-interest loans and supporting corporate bond issuance worth around 1 trillion won in cooperation with major companies and financial institutions.
The announcement was made during an economy-related ministers' meeting on Wednesday, which addressed responses to shifting trade conditions, including U.S. tariffs and global supply chain changes. As a result, policy financing for the auto sector will increase from 13 trillion won to 15 trillion won, worth around $10.1 billion this year. This came as the U.S. is a key market for Korea's auto industry, accounting for $34.7 billion, or nearly half of the country's total auto exports, which was worth $70.8 billion last year. With Washington's 25% tariffs in place, Korea's auto exports to the U.S. are projected to drop by nearly 19% this year. One expert says the financial package may serve as a short-term buffer, but a different approach is needed for a long-term solution.
To fundamentally address the issue, the government needs to focus on boosting productivity, developing new technologies, and easing labor management tensions.
Aside from the aid package, the government will also extend its EV subsidy program, tied to manufacturer discounts to boost domestic sales, from the first half of the year through the end of 2025. It will also support efforts to tap into new markets, particularly in the global south, as part of its push to diversify auto exports. Plans include the early implementation of free trade agreements with countries including the UAE and Ecuador, and the resumption of FTA talks with Mexico to help open up new export destinations. The government is also accelerating efforts to diversify export markets, focusing on key industries most vulnerable to trade disruptions. It plans to inject over $40 million worth of support for overseas operations of small and mid-sized firms, while expanding R&D funding to boost technological competitiveness. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok said the government will soon unveil $6.7 billion worth of supplementary budget to boost industrial competitiveness and tackle global trade shifts, calling for swift parliamentary support. 신세벽, Arirang News.
For the presidential election on June 3rd, politicians are speeding up their moves to join the race. To take a look at how the rival parties are preparing and what's ahead, let's turn to our political correspondent, Shin Ha-young. Ha-young, the Democratic Party leader resigned from the chairmanship of the party today. What does this mean?
Right. Today, Democratic Party Chairman Lee Jae-myung, who is also widely seen as the likely DP candidate, stepped down from his position, hinting at his presidential bid. And this all comes as the political scene quickly shifted into early election mode following former President Yoon Suk-yeol's removal from office. And Lee, who lost to former President Yoon by a margin of 0.73 percentage points in the last presidential election, has not officially declared his candidacy, but plans to do so on Thursday. Take a listen.
I am grateful to have been able to serve as the party leader for 3 years and to have achieved some meaningful results. Things were tough in the beginning, but I'm leaving with the situation looking better than when I started. I will soon be starting a new chapter.
Politicians outside E's faction within the DP are also preparing to enter the race. And among them, former DP lawmaker Kim Do-kan, who also served as Minister of Interior and Governor of Gyeongsang-namdo Province, was the first to announce his candidacy. And Kim Dong-yeon, the current governor of Gyeonggi-do Province, also formally declared his bid today before departing for Michigan in the U.S. to address tariff-related issues. And following his resignation, the DP quickly shifted into election mode, planning to launch an election committee as soon as possible. The party aims to select its presidential candidate by the end of this month. And primary rules and the election schedule are also expected to be finalized soon, with the candidate registration expected to start next week. And there's growing attention on how the primary will be run, as different factions within the party hold differing views. And in the last presidential election, the primary was based on the results of a party membership vote given a 50% share, and public opinion polls also given a 50% share. And this time, however, politicians outside each faction are pushing for an open primary where the outcome is determined entirely by public voting.
And what about the People Power Party? Any updates?
Well, as for the People Power Party, there is no front runner like its rivals so far, and the primary is expected to have around 10 candidates or even more. And today, now former Labor Minister Kim Moon-soo, who resigned from his post yesterday, declared his candidacy. Let's take a listen.
I received a lot of support and encouragement from the public. I've decided to follow the will of the people. I'm committed to defending South Korea's identity as a free democracy and doing my part to help make the country even stronger.
PPP lawmaker An Chol-soo also declared his fourth run for presidency on Tuesday. And former PPP chair Han Dong-un said the formation of his camp will begin on Thursday, while Seoul Mayor Oh Se-un is planning to announce his candidacy on Sunday. And Daegu Mayor Hong Jun-pyo's supporters said his official announcement will be on 14th of April. And the party's election committee today decided to hold its national convention on May 3rd to choose its official presidential candidate. And candidate registration will take place next Monday for 2 days, and the first round contenders will be announced on April 16th. And with as many as 15 people expected to run, there is a lot of talk about how many rounds of cutoffs there will be and how many candidates make it through each time. And those details are set to be decided at tomorrow's meeting.
And with the election date now official, I hear the Election Commission today ensured a fair and transparent process.
You're right, Jungmin. National Election Commission Chief Do Tae-ak today stressed the importance of the 21st presidential election, saying the commission will make the voting and counting process more transparent to build public trust. Take a listen.
The National Election Commission takes this election seriously and is committed to ensuring a fair and impartial process. Despite the short timeline, we'll do all we can to prepare thoroughly so the will of the people is fully reflected in the outcome.
Do also emphasized that election fraud is impossible, noting that over 300,000 clerks take part in the voting and counting process, and more than 100,000 observers monitor every step. And CCTV will record in real time the storage rooms for ballot boxes, and the footage will be shared. And ballot counting clerks will count the ballots with their hands in addition to the electronic counting.
Now let's shift our focus to the constitutional reform that has been making the headlines during the past couple of days here in the nation. I hear the Assembly Speaker today backtracked on the idea of holding a referendum on the election day. What's the story there?
Well, the calls for constitutional reform surface almost in every election in South Korea. But this time, National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik pushed for a nationwide referendum to take place alongside the upcoming election, emphasizing the need to strengthen the separation of powers to ensure popular sovereignty and national unity. However, on Wednesday, he withdrew his earlier proposal, saying that it has become virtually impossible under the current political turmoil, especially after acting President Han Duck-soo nominated 2 Constitutional Court justices to fill the bench. And instead, Woo suggested opening full-scale discussions on the revision after the presidential election.
All right, thanks, Ha-young. Keep us posted.
Thank you.
The Korean labor market is holding steady with employment expanding in March, growing by almost 200,000 from a year ago. but that expansion remains uneven. Moon Ji-young explains.
South Korea's job market saw robust growth in March, but challenges persist, particularly in the construction and manufacturing sectors, along with youth employment. According to Statistics Korea's employment report released on Wednesday, the number of employed people aged 15 or older reached almost 28.6 million in March, marking a year-on-year increase of 193,000. This gain marks the third consecutive month of growth. By industry, the health and social welfare sector led the job gains, followed by public administration, defense, and social security, as well as the finance field. However, construction saw the largest year-on-year drop in jobs since data collection began in 2013, marking a continuous decline for 11 consecutive months. The manufacturing sector also recorded its most significant decline since November 2020, reflecting a ninth straight month of falling employment. Some experts forecast that manufacturing, the backbone of the domestic economy, could see a further decline in jobs this year as export growth slows due to a potential trade war triggered by U.S. tariffs.
Due to the shock from tariffs, our product exports may decline, leading to a faster reduction in job opportunities. Since most of what we sell consists of manufactured goods, this could result in a reduction of decent jobs in the sector.
By age group, employment for those aged 60 years and older primarily led the job growth, adding 365,000 year-on-year. In contrast, the number of employed individuals aged 15 to 29 dropped by 206,000. The employment rate for young adults stood at 44.5%, marking the lowest monthly record for any March since 2021. With this latest data, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok expressed concerns regarding sluggish job growth, particularly in export-driven industries such as manufacturing, during an economic officials meeting on Wednesday. To address the volatility in the trade market, the government has committed to a supplementary budget of 10 trillion won, or roughly $6.7 billion. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
We missed the sun today. Spotty rain that started in the west is gradually moving in across the country. Rain could take a break in between through tomorrow, so make sure to keep an umbrella handy. Despite the rain, pleasant spring warmth continues, with temperatures going up to similar to today, so let's take a closer look. The morning chill has eased, and Seoul starts off at 9 degrees Celsius, Gyeongju at 9 degrees as well. Meanwhile, the capital area will be dusty all day tomorrow. Then highs will go up to 20 degrees Celsius in most parts of Korea. Daegu and Gyeongju will be warmer at 22 degrees, but do expect to see some afternoon rain. Disappointing news for those who plan to check out the cherry blossoms this weekend. Rain is in the forecast for both days. Also, temperatures will plunge on Sunday at a high of just 9 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.